And welcome to the special meeting of the ISD 191 Burnsville-Egan Savage School Board. Tonight is July 13th, 2017, and the time is 6:30 p.m. I'd like to first welcome our audience. We are so pleased to have folks with us on this special meeting night and appreciate your taking time to be with us. I'd also like to welcome our Superintendent Amoroso to her new chair as CEO of our district, and this is truly a special meeting in a number of ways, so welcome.
Thank you very much.
Director Schmidt, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Moving on to the business portion of our meeting. We first need to approve tonight's agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Next, our consent agenda. Although board action is required, it is generally unnecessary to hold discussion on these items. In the event a board member wishes to discuss an item, that item will be moved for separate consideration. We only have one item. Any discussion on that? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. New business. I would like to invite Lisa Ryder to the podium. We are being asked to adopt a resolution relating to renewing and increasing general education revenue of the school district and calling a special election. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. Before us and prompted here on the screen for those from home is the beginning of our recommendation here. There's a resolution that is attached that it is referencing. We have spent some time talking about our referendum and the revenues we receive from the referendums. Just for the general public's knowledge, we currently have two authorizations of referendum that we operate under, and they overlap each other by 5 years. So we had one approved by our voters in 2007 and a second one approved in 2011. With those two authorizations, the first one originally approved in 2007 will be expiring as of the end of June 30, 2018. And so the action that is necessary in order for that to continue would be voter approval of a renewal of that at minimum. And so before you tonight, we've had some conversations in the last few weeks regarding possibilities of what that might look like, potential ballot languages, as well as tax impact to our taxpayers as an estimated amount that's been calculated by our financial advisors at this time. So after that conversation has been held, we have put together, with the help of an attorney, the ballot and the resolution that you see before you. The ballot would call for two questions to be on the ballot. One would, question number one, would address a straight renewal, which is the current calculated amount of $757.19 per adjusted pupil unit. And the second question then would address an increase to the amount of $415 with inflation applied in future years on the whole amount. Both questions would call for renewal for a period of 10 years. Question one must pass in order for question two to even be possible, okay? So worst case scenario, we'll go from that end to the best case scenario. The worst case scenario would be question one is does not pass, and that it is in that event, then our current referendum would expire, and the financial implication for our budget would be $7.3 million or thereabout that we would lose in funding that we currently are receiving. Next possibility would be question one does pass and question two does not. That means your renewal would continue the existing referendum that we have as is with a straight renewal for another 10 years. Next scenario could be question one passes and question 2 passes, in which case our current existed funding that we now experience would continue, as well as $415 per pupil unit that would generate additional revenue for the next 10 years again. And in that scenario, when question 2 would then pass only because question 1 did too, are we then seeing inflation applied? So that's the basis and the understanding up under and behind these, the method of why the questions are laid out the way they are and written the way they are. And so I just want to make clear that that's how that is looking. After, and included in this resolution, I should say, is also the necessity of our board to call the special election. And so as you note in the recommendation here, that special election would take place on November 7th between the hours of 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. We've already had conversations regarding our precincts, so this is really about calling the election and approval of the ballot language. I'll read the recommendation.
Yes, please.
That the Board of Education adopt a resolution relating to renewing and increasing general education revenue of the school district and calling a special election thereon.
Thank you for that background, Lisa. Do I have a motion to move the recommendation?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Are there questions or discussion? Director Luth?
No questions, just a comment in that I want to, a lot of work, not only by the board in various dialogues and meetings, et cetera, over time has gone into play, but I do know that your staff and other members of the leadership team here have spent a lot of time pulling this together. And so I just want our viewing public in particular to know and understand that a lot of work goes into a couple questions that are going to show up on a ballot in November, and that I'm fully supportive of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Miller?
So, Lisa, this first part's not a question. It's probably fair to say you're the best tuned in with the finances in the district. First of all, to be clear, this is operating money, correct?
Is operating funds.
Yes. The 75719, if that was not to pass, you would be pretty challenged in your position of keeping our balance straight. Is that correct?
You would be challenged.
Okay. And if the additional 415 was to pass, is that money lots of extra gravy, or is that, my understanding is that's money to kind of catch us up and keep from being further challenged in the future. Is that a fair assessment?
That is a fair assessment, yes.
Okay. And then the other part I'd like to ask is, we had some discussion around the actual language of the ballot last time we talked. Do we have those finalized? Can we review the
Yes.
actual final copy of those?
It is included in the resolution, and this should reflect the conversation as held. So I'll pull it up on the screen here for a moment. So ballot question number 1 is approval of the renewed referendum levy authorization, and passage of just question 1 alone does absolutely no increase on taxes for our taxpayers, just continues what is current for 10 years more. And then you can see that right below it, and I think most of the dialogue was around question 2. And so in question 2, it is clarifying that if question 1 is approved, then the board has proposed a total authorization amount of the full 1172.19 per pupil, which is the 415 on top of the 757.
Yeah, that looks like what we had discussed. So I would also like to strongly voice my support of both questions passing.
Thank you. Director Schmid?
Well, thank you. I think both Dan and Eric kind of alluded to it, but first of all, in the questions, yeah, that was hours of discussion, and so to see it now, it's beautiful, compared to what we started with. And so, thanks to you and to, the rest for taking our feedback. It's crystal clear. I don't think anyone can be confused by it. And then on page 12 of our packet, or A2, is probably the second most important thing in this table for our public. It's the table that shows what would happen. And I'm not going to suggest you erroneously said just passing question 1 will be no tax increase. It would actually be a tax decrease,
Fair.
Which is called out on this table.
Thank you.
And so, and that's across the board, not just for any particular house. And so, just maintaining the levy is a tax decrease for our taxpayers. And I think to Director Miller's point, the second question is really just so we can sustain the inflationary costs that we're dealing with. It's nice that the legislature funds us, significantly below inflation, so we have to keep up with inflation. And so that's all we're asking for in this. And so I wanted to thank you for putting out this table. I think this will be very valuable, as we go out to our taxpayers and to our voters, to show them the consequence. I don't know what the median house specifically is in Burns, League, and Savage, but let's say it's $250,000. Even with both questions, that's $10 a month is what we're asking for. So I do appreciate all the work. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Courier.
This is a real theoretical question and likely not to happen. But if we would have a negative inflation rate, how would that affect the 415? Would it?
It is my understanding it would not, but we could obtain professional and more informed counsel on that.
Okay. That just popped into my head. I thought, what if we have a couple of recession years like we did in 2008? Thank you for that. And I fully support both questions as well as with my fellow board members.
Why not? Sure.
Director Vandenboom.
Thanks. I will, it's really not a question, Lisa, because it's also additional comments, but, and the questions, so the 757 and 19 has been a 10-year levy, so that's the same amount of money that the district has received for every year for 10 years with no inflation.
In total, it is the same amount of money. The law changed as to how that's calculated, so it's been adjusted for that, but otherwise, yes, it's the exact same end
So
amount.
essentially, it's been flat
Yes.
for 10 years.
It's been flat with no inflation.
And if the taxpayers are kind enough to pass question number 1, we'd essentially have the same flat rate for 20 years.
Yes.
And then, so the fact that question number 2 is in there really is, we're already, even in this adopted budget, we're spending down our fund balance already at the current rate.
Yes.
So clearly, question 2 is also something that we very much need. And I think several of our other board members alluded to that as well. So I do support it, but I do want to make sure that, sort of the public understands that question 1 is essentially maintaining the same level of funding that would be for 20 years, effectively.
Yes.
And so question number 2 is an important question for us this coming November.
Great. Thank you all. Great discussion. With that, those in favor of adopting the recommendation as read, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Thank you very much, Lisa, and thank you, board members. Clearly, the onus is now on us to get information out and make sure that our voters are well informed. With that, I will take a motion to adjourn to a closed session as permitted by MS 13D.05 to discuss negotiation strategies. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor of adjourning, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. We are adjourned.